Okay, so draw a squiggly line underneath number 22. Draw a squiggly line underneath number 22. We are starting to worry. I'll keep my. And then write the title of this vocab, TPT, Chapter 7. The Royal Banquet. And then write today's date, March 4th, 2021. Number 23. Carla, we already started, so you need to catch up.
Okay, there was something wrong with my computer.
Okay, well, I don't need to know. You just need to catch up. Okay, number 23. Yes, Victoria. There are 5 words. 5 words today. The first one is the word gusto. Gusto. G-U-S-T-O. Gusto. G-U-S-T-O. Gusto. Gusto is a noun. It's a noun, and it means enthusiasm. So if something is done with gusto, it means it's done with enthusiasm. Somebody is excited or enthusiastic about it. If you could say something like, I ate my donuts with gusto this morning. That means you did it with enthusiasm, you were real excited. Yes, you did it with excitement. So we'll add that. Enthusiasm or excitement. Yes, Smith.
Who has vocabulary cards today?
You. So, do you know what to do, or do you need to, you can look back on that word wall for an example of how to do them.
I know what to do. I've heard you say it a lot.
That's true. That's true. Number 23 is gusto, which means it's a noun, and it means enthusiasm or excitement. Number 24 is the word famished. Famished. F-A-M-I-S-H-E-D. Famished. F-A-M-I-S-H-E-D. Famished. This is not famished. It's famished. So we say this ed the same way that we do when it is a past tense verb, but famished is actually an adjective. Famished, F-A-M-I-S-H-E-D, is an adjective. It'd be used to describe a person or an animal, like a living thing, but not a plant. You wouldn't really use it for a plant. But something that eats, something that physically eats, because, so you can probably have an idea of what it might have to do with, because famished means extremely hungry. Extremely hungry. The stray dog showed up at my house and was famished because he had not eaten in days. Famished. So we fed him. There, now it's happy. Yes, Victoria.
Like when we did the exaggerating idiom. What was it?
Hyperbole.
Hyperbole.
Kind of, except famished. You can actually be famished. Like, because famished just means extremely hungry, not starving. But if you said the dog, well, if the dog hadn't eaten in a couple days, it literally would be starving. But if you said, oh, I'm so ready for lunch, I'm starving, that would be hyperbole. Yes, or even just starving, because are you literally starving, as in you had no food and you were going to die? No. But famished wouldn't quite be hyperbole. It wouldn't be exaggeration, because you can be famished. You can be extremely hungry. Zari, you're not muted. Okay, Zari, just catch up. If you need to watch the beginning of the video this afternoon, you can, to get those first 2 words. Because we're going to go ahead and do number 25. Which is the word unappetizing. Unappetizing. U-N-A-P-P-E-T-I-Z-I-N-G. Unappetizing. U-N-A-P-P-E-T-I-Z-I-N-G. Unappetizing. I think I know why hands are up. I hope I know why hands are up. But Colin, I did see your hand first.
So, are all of our vocabs today about food?
Maybe. Maybe. That's a good observation. Okay, but that is a good observation. Let's see, I think I saw Zadie's hand first. Next.
Doesn't unappetizing have a prefix?
It does have a prefix. What is the prefix? Un, U-N, which comes before an adjective to make that adjective the opposite. So I'm going to tell you what appetizing means. Appetizing means something that makes you want to eat it. So what do you think unappetizing means? Un is a prefix that makes an adjective the opposite. So if the adjective appetizing means that something looks really good and you want to eat it, what does unappetizing mean? Zari.
That it doesn't look good and you don't want to eat it.
It does not look good and you don't want to eat it. Very good. Unappetizing is an adjective. You mostly only see the prefix un on adjectives because it changes an adjective to the opposite. Yes, Victoria, quickly.
That's what I was
Smith, quickly.
When you check my planner, can I ask you questions about the vocab?
Yes. So unappetizing is an adjective, which means something is not appealing. So appealing means you want it. Not appealing means you don't want it. What can we say instead of not appealing? Michaela? Unappealing. Very good, but I wanted to make the definition a little bit more clear. So appealing means you want it. If it's unappetizing, that means it is not appealing or it's unappealing. So that means 2 of these words could be synonyms. Well, if you changed one word, it could be a synonym to another. What 2 words here could be synonyms? Kingston?
Unappealing and unappetizing.
Okay, good. So Kingston changed this word to unappealing and said it means the same thing as unappetizing. We could also take off un and say that appetizing and appealing are synonyms. Either way. But are unappetizing and appealing synonyms? Cullen?
No.
No. Who knows what that word is? That means opposite words. The opposite of a synonym. Zadie? An antonym. So unappetizing and appealing are antonyms. They are opposite words. They mean the opposite thing. Okay. Number 26. I'm going to change my marker after this one. Unabridged. Unabridged. U-N-A-B-R-I-D-G-E-D. Unabridged. U-N-A-B-R-I-D-G-E-D. If you haven't noticed, I've started spelling it by syllables. So when I pause for a second when I'm spelling, that means it's a new syllable. So unabridged. Oh, whoops. U-N-A-B-R-I-D-G-E-D. Unabridged. Victoria? It has a prefix. Again, that UN. Abridged means something is shortened. So knowing what the prefix un does to the adjective abridged, which means shortened, what do you think unabridged is? Carla?
Not short.
Very good. So unabridged is an adjective. Remember, we mostly only see the prefix on adjectives. If you see un on something that is not an adjective, that might mean it's not a prefix. I'm trying to think of anything, but I can't off the top of my head. Adjective, it's a describing word, and it means not shortened or complete. So complete is a synonym. It means the same thing. Unabridged means not shortened, therefore that thing is complete. So if you have a book that is unabridged, it means it's not shortened. Cullen, when you had that Swiss Family Robinson book, it was abridged, which means it was shortened. Sometimes you get that with really long books, so that they're a little easier to read. So they kind of take out everything that you don't necessarily need in order to understand the story. Yes, Mason, thank you for not raising your hand while I was speaking.
Like Harry Potter is unabridged.
Harry Potter is unabridged. However, if you get like books on tape, you have to really be, or like audiobooks, you have to be really careful that you don't accidentally buy the abridged version, because that means they shortened it. Unless you want one that's a little shorter. If you want one that's a little shorter, okay, yeah, go ahead. Zadie?
Isn't unicycle doesn't have UN and it's not a prefix?
There you go, unicycle. Unicycle is a noun. Is there such thing as an is-cycle? No. So if you see UN at the beginning of a word that is not an adjective, it's probably not a prefix. It's just part of the word. Kingston.
So abridged is means it's shortened.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't the movies shortened, like Harry Potter movies?
Yes, but it's a little different because it's like if you take a long book and you take out all the unimportant parts that don't lead to the end to make it a little shorter or easier to read. Like Swiss Family Robinson, they did that. It was from a series of books that are classic novels. That means novels written a really long time ago that are abridged in order to be easier for kids to read. So sometimes they may take books that are written for adults, like not bad, just they're written for adults. They're not bad. But they abridge them so that they're easier for kids to read because they're on interesting topics, like the Swiss Family Robinson was a family that was, I think they were like cast away on an island.
They were going to another world.
Yeah, and they
hit a rock and
yes, exactly.
So Harry Potter's not unabridged.
Movies would not, no, because it's a book. It's for books.
I mean the book.
Books would be abridged or unabridged.
So Harry Potter's.
Movies would not be abridged or unabridged.
So Harry Potter is unabridged.
You can probably find an abridged copy out there, but the books, the Harry Potters that I have are unabridged. Remember, unabridged is when you take a well-known book and you shorten it to make it easier to read or quicker to read. Okay. That's just what it is. Yes, Victoria.
All of our definitions today are abridged. Well, like they're not shortened, but they're abridged.
Well, that's different because unabridged does not just mean, abridged does not just mean short. It means you took something long and made it shorter. That's what abridged means. So unabridged means it's something long that has stayed long. They did not try to take it shorter. Abridged does not mean short. It's not a synonym for short. It's a synonym for shortened. which means something was made shorter than it was. Shortened, and short are not the same thing. Short means small. Shortened means something big was made small. They're different words. Okay? Again, because en is a suffix. So short means something small. Shorten means you take something large and you make it small. That's why prefixes and suffixes are so important, because they completely change the meanings of words. So if you don't pay attention to what the prefix or suffix is and you just see short, you're like, oh, it means it's small. Nope. It means it was something that was once large that was made small. Ed is also. That's just a verb. Shorten means to take something large and make it small. Ed means it happens in the past. That is not the word ended. There's no D after the N. Okay. One more word. I think I can fit it. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead. Okay, we only have 30 minutes. That means if we don't have time to get to the questions, you have to do them tonight for homework. And I'll email your parents and be like, let them do this. This is entirely independent. Do not help them. And I will be able to tell anyway when I look and your answers are completely different than the types of answers you give in school. I will know, oh, their parents helped them.
I don't have parents.
But I'm going to email them to be like, please let them do this 100% on their own. You may time them, but other than that, nothing. Okay, 27. Is the word exquisite. Most of you have probably heard this word before, especially if you read a lot. Those of you that read a lot might not have too many brand new words. If you don't read a lot, there's probably going to be a lot of brand new words. Exquisite. E-X-Q-U-I-S-I-T-E. Exquisite. E-X-Q-U-I-S-I-T-E. Exquisite. Exquisite is another adjective. You describe it. It means something is very beautiful or delicate. So exquisite is an adjective that means that something is very beautiful or delicate. So if you have a piece of jewelry that's on a very thin chain, but it's very pretty, that would be described as exquisite. You have to be careful with it, otherwise that chain is going to break. Or if you have glass figurines, those could be described as exquisite. They're very beautiful and they're delicate. You have to be careful. Okay, make sure that you have those definitions. Then close your vocab notebooks, put them in your desks, and then get in your good listening position. Please do this quickly so that we have time to finish today's lesson. Okay, so everybody, go ahead and open your book. You should already be in your listening position. You should not be making us wait on you, and those that are ready then have to do something at home that they wouldn't normally have to do. Open to page 80. Should be sitting up straight, chair pushed all the way in, nothing on your desk other than your book and your bookmark. Back all the way back in the chair. Still bodies, ready to listen. Chapter 7, The Royal Banquet. Right this way. Follow us. Come along. Step lively. Here we go, they shouted, hopping from the wagon and bounding up the broad marble stairway. Milo and Talk followed close behind. It was a strange-looking palace, and if he didn't know better, Milo would have said that it looked exactly like an enormous book standing on one end, with its front door in the lower part of the binding, just where they usually place the publisher's name. Once inside, they hurried down a long hallway. which glittered with crystal chandeliers and echoed with their footsteps. The walls and ceilings were covered with mirrors, whose reflections danced dizzily along with them, and the footmen bowed coldly. "We must be terribly late," gasped the Earl nervously, as they reached the tall doors of the banquet hall. It was a vast room, full of people loudly talking and arguing. The long table was carefully set with gold plates and linen napkins. An attendant stood behind each chair, and at the center, raised slightly above the others, was a throne covered in crimson cloth. Directly behind, on the wall, was the royal coat of arms, flanked by the flags of Dictionopolis. Milo noticed many of the people he had seen in the marketplace. The letterman was busy explaining to an interested group the history of the W, and off in a corner, the humbug and the spelling bee were arguing fiercely about nothing at all. Officer Shrift wandered through the crowd, suspiciously muttering, "Guilty, guilty, they're all guilty." And on noticing Milo, brightened visibly and commented in passing, "Is it 6 million years already? My, how time flies." Everyone seemed quite grumpy about having to wait for lunch, and they were all relieved to see the tardy guests arrived. "Certainly glad you finally made it, old man," said the humbug, cordially pumping Milo's hand. "As guest of honor, you must choose the menu, of course." "Oh my," he thought, not knowing what to say. "Be quick about it," suggested the spelling bee. "I'm famished. F-A-M-I-S-H-E-D. As Milo tried to think, there was an ear-shattering blast of trumpets, entirely off-key, and a page announced to the startled guest, "King Azaz the Unabridged." The king strode through the door and over to the table and settled his great bulk onto the throne, calling irritably, "Places, everyone! Take your places!" He was the largest man Milo had ever seen, with a great stomach, large piercing eyes, a gray beard that reached to his waist, and a silver signet ring on the little finger of his left hand. He also wore a small crown and a robe with the letters of the alphabet beautifully embroidered all over it. "What have we here?" he said, staring down at Tok and Milo as everyone else took his place. "If you please," said Milo, "my name is Milo, and this is Tok. Thank you very much for inviting us to your banquet, and I think your place is beautiful." "Exquisite," corrected the Duke. "Lovely," counseled the minister. "Handsome," recommended the Count. "Pretty," hinted the Earl. "Charming," submitted the Undersecretary. "Silence," suggested the King. "Now, young man, what can you do to entertain us? Sing songs? Tell stories? Compose sonnets? Juggle plates? Do tumbling tricks? Which is it?" "I can't do any of those things," admitted Milo. "What an ordinary little boy," commented the King. "Why, my cabinet members can do all sorts of things. The Duke here can make mountains out of molehills. The minister splits hairs. The Count makes hay while the sun shines. The Earl leaves no stone unturned, and the Undersecretary," he finished ominously, "hangs by a thread. Can't you do anything at all?" "I can count to 1,000, offered Milo. "Ugh! Numbers! Never mention numbers here. Only use them when we absolutely have to," growled Azaz disgustedly. "Now why don't you and Tok come up here and sit next to me, and we'll have some dinner." "Are you ready with the menu?" reminded the humbug. "Well," said Milo, remembering that his mother had always told him to eat lightly when he was a guest. "Why don't we have a light meal?" "A light meal it shall be," roared the bug, waving his arms. The waiters rushed in carrying large serving platters and set them on the table in front of the king. When he lifted the covers, shafts of brilliant colored light leaped from the plates and bounced around the ceiling, the walls, across the floor, and out the windows. "Not a very substantial meal," said the humbug, rubbing his eyes, "but quite an attractive one. Perhaps you can suggest something a little more filling." So what happened? What did Milo mean by a light meal? Smith.
Not a ton of food, just a little bit.
Just a little bit of food. What did they serve? Colin.
A lot of food.
I didn't hear anything about food. Where do you see food? What did they serve? Aaron?
They served light.
They served actual light. Can you eat light? Is that what Milo meant? So light, a light meal is a what? Zadie?
A light meal is not a lot of food.
Well, but what is it? What is that an example of, that phrase, a light meal? Zari?
Like, do you mean the actual meaning?
No, what is it an example? What is that phrase an example of? Kingston?
I was going to say simile, but
Not a simile. Simile has like or as in it. Smith?
An idiom.
An idiom. Because do you literally mean lights as your meal? But in Dictionopolis, are there idioms, does it seem like? No. So anything you say, they literally mean that. They take the literal meaning. Let's see what happens next. The king clapped his hands. The platters were removed, and without thinking, Milo quickly suggested, well, in that case, I think we ought to have a square meal of... A square meal it is, shouted the humbug again. The king clapped his hands once more, and the waiters reappeared carrying plates heaped high with steaming squares of all sizes and colors. So what happened now? Michaela?
the X was a square meal.
What is a square meal? Who knows what a square meal is? I'll tell you what. So sometimes on cereal commercials, they'll say something like, part of a square breakfast. And then they show, like, everything. Michaela?
A lot of food on one table.
Well, square means you have something from each food group. A square meal means you have something from each food group. So, like a healthy meal. So Milo asked for a healthy meal, but did they bring a healthy meal, Michaela? No, they took what he said literally and brought what?
They gave him heated pie with steamed squares.
Squares. They brought squares, hot squares. Ugh, said the spelling bee, tasting one. These are awful. No one else seemed to like them very much either, and the humbug got one caught in his throat and almost choked. Time for speeches, announced the king, as the plates were again removed and everyone looked glum. You first, he commanded, pointing to Milo. Your Majesty, ladies and gentlemen, started Milo timidly. I would like to take this opportunity to say that in all the... That's quite enough, snapped the king. Mustn't talk all day. But I'd just begun, objected Milo. Next, bellowed the king. Roast turkey, mashed potatoes, vanilla ice cream, recited the humbug, bouncing up and down quickly. What a strange speech, thought Milo, for he'd heard many in the past and knew that they were supposed to be long and dull. Hamburgers, corn on the cob, chocolate pudding, Pudding, said the spelling bee in his turn. Frankfurters, sour pickles, strawberry jam, shouted Officer Shrift from his chair. Since he was taller sitting than standing, he didn't bother to get up. And so down the line it went, with each guest rising briefly, making a short speech, and then resuming his place. When everyone had finished, the king rose. You're not reading, you're playing with your Post-it. And there's part of the problem. And so down the line it went, with each guest rising briefly, making a short speech, and then resuming his place. When everyone had finished, the king rose. Pâté de foie gras, soupe à l'oignon, faisan sous cloche, salade endive, fromage et fruit demi-tasse, he said carefully, and clapped his hands again. The waiters reappeared immediately, carrying heavy, hot trays which they set on the table. Each one contained the exact words spoken by the various guests, And they all began eating immediately with great gusto. So in Dictionopolis, what are words? What do you do with words in Dictionopolis? Lena? You eat them. So their speeches were what? Why were they saying all these foods instead of what we think of as a speech? Lena?
Because they wanted to eat the words that they were saying.
They wanted to eat the words. Ooh, isn't that an idiom? Who's ever heard the idiom, eat your words? It means you take them back. You take them back. You say, I didn't say that. Or you say, never mind, I'm wrong. Dig in, said the king, poking Milo with his elbow and looking disapprovingly at his plate. I can't say that I think much of your choice. I didn't know I was going to have to eat my words, objected Milo. Of course, everyone here does, the king grunted. You should have made a tastier speech. Milo looked around at everyone busily stuffing himself and then back at his own unappetizing plate. It certainly didn't look worth eating, and he was so very hungry. Here, try some somersault, suggested the Duke. It improves the flavor. Have a rigmarole, offered the Count, passing the bread basket. Or a ragamuffin, seconded the minister. Perhaps you'd care for a synonym bun, suggested the Duke. Why not wait for your just desserts, mumbled the Earl indistinctly, his mouth full of food. How many times must I tell you not to bite off more than you can chew? Snapped the undersecretary, patting the distressed Earl on the back. So we know bite off more than you can chew means what? Everybody should know this. Kingston.
Well, you do more things that you possibly do.
You try to do more than what you can actually do. Everybody should know that because you literally had to do that for your independent practice yesterday. But what do they mean here? What's happening right now? Zari.
They're actually putting the words into his mouth and he's actually stuffing it.
So he literally put too much in his mouth, more than he can chew, and now he's choking. In one ear and out the other, scolded the Duke, attempting to stuff one of his words through the Earl's head. If it isn't one thing, it's another, chided the minister. Out of the frying pan into the fire, shouted the Count, burning himself badly. Well, you don't have to bite my head off, screamed the terrified Earl and flew at the others in a rage. The 5 of them scuffled wildly under the table. Stop that at once, thundered Azaz, or I'll banish the lot of you. Sorry. Excuse me. Forgive us. Pardon. Regrets, they apologized in turn, and sat down glaring at each other. The rest of the meal was finished in silence until the king, wiping the gravy stains from his vest, called for dessert. Milo, who had not eaten anything, looked up eagerly. We're having a special treat today, said the king as the delicious smells of homemade pastry filled the banquet hall. By royal command, the pastry chefs have worked all night in the half bakery to make sure that... The half bakery? Questioned Milo. Of course, the half bakery, snapped the king. Where do you think half-baked ideas come from? Now, please don't interrupt. By royal command, the pastry chefs have worked all night to... What's a half-baked idea? Asked Milo again. Will you be quiet? Growled Azaz angrily. But before he could begin again, 3 large serving carts were wheeled into the hall and everyone jumped up to help himself. A half-baked idea. Does anybody know what a half-baked idea is? Michaela?
You're thinking about it, but you don't want to say it.
Close. Zadie?
An idea that you didn't finish.
Even closer. Zari? So Michaela said an idea that you don't want to share yet. Zadie said an idea that you didn't finish. Zari?
It's an idea that you haven't really thought out.
There you go. Half-baked ideas are ideas that people haven't really thought out or researched. And you'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute. You're not standing, you're not walking. Scoot your chair in, please. You don't need to worry about your shoes right now. They're very tasty, explained the humbug, but they don't always agree with you. Here's one that's very good. He handed it to Milo, and through the icing and nuts, Milo saw that it said, "The earth is flat." People swallowed that one for years, commented the spelling bee, but it's not very popular these days, D-A-Y-S. He picked up a long one that stated, "The moon is made of green cheese," and hungrily bit off the part that said cheese. "Now there's a half-baked idea," he said, smiling. Milo looked at the great assortment of cakes, which were being eaten almost as quickly as anyone could read them. The Count was munching contentedly on "It never rains but it pours," and the King was busy slicing one that stated, "Night air is bad air." "I wouldn't eat too many of those if I were you," advised Talk. "They may look good, but you can get terribly sick of them." Carla, are you reading and following along? Because it doesn't look like it. "Don't worry," Milo replied. "I'll just wrap one up for later." And he folded his napkin around. Everything happens for the best. Okay. I don't know if we'll have time. Well, we will, but we're going to have to pack up quickly because we're going to get through this today. Now, because you guys were a little too excited, which makes me think, oh, your parents are going to do the questions for you. And that's not what we're doing. So, let's see. Who knows that theirs is on the top? Lena, can you go check and tell who, what first two people to go? Girls at home, go ahead and get up. Number 1, choose 2 adjectives to describe King Azaz. Explain why you chose them. So you're picking 2 describing words to describe King Azaz. They need to make sense based on the story because then you explain why you chose them. I chose the adjective blank because blah, 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 blah. I also chose the adjective blank because blah, 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 blah. Number 2, eat your words is an idiom meaning to publicly acknowledge that you were wrong about something you said. In Dictionopolis, what does it mean to eat your words? What would your speech be? Remember, red underline means you only write the red underlined part. So that means you do not have to write eat your words as an idiom meaning to publicly acknowledge that you were wrong about something you said. But you must write this. Number 3, predict what will happen next in the story. Number 4, put the following events in order. Everyone eats the half-baked cakes. The cabinet members get into a fight. Milo and Talk meet King Azaz. Milo accidentally orders light and squares for his meal. Milo and Talk see Officer Shrift again. So remember, if you choose number 4, you don't have to write all this and then rewrite them in order. You can just write number 4, put the following events in order, and then copy them down in the correct order. Does everybody understand? Remember, write the question with the number, skip 1 or 2 lines, write the whole answer, at least 2, that means 2 or more complete sentences. Skip 1 or 2 lines, write the next question all the way out, unless there's red underline, then only write the red underline. Skip 1 or 2 lines, write it all, and so on. Any questions about the questions? Quickly, Smith.
For what would your speech be? Can we write my speech and then like a colon and then do the speech?
You would just write my speech would be, comma, quotation marks.
Okay, I wasn't totally.
My speech would be, comma, quotation mark, blah, 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 period, quotation mark. Remember, like when we learned dialogue and quotes, that's what you're doing there. Kingston, what's your question?
I was going to say something about like putting number 4 and then writing out which way, like, and then 1.
Oh, do you mean like, okay, yeah, that's an idea too. So Kingston said his idea was to write number 4 exactly as it appears and then put numbers to the side. That's okay too.
Oh.
Like if this was the second thing that happens, you can put a 2 here. Does everybody understand? It's up to you, whatever's easiest. Okay, any other questions about the questions? You will have 15 minutes when I say go. Let me go get my phone. Make sure that you are thinking and writing the whole time. Every single person at this point should be able to answer at least 2 complete questions. Out of these questions, every single person should be able to completely answer at least 2. Do not waste time. Do not dawdle. You need to think. Yes, Zadie, go.
And again, just because you said at least 2, don't stop at 2.
Exactly. Just because I said at least 2, if you haven't finished answering the question, don't stop at 2.